They fined me $500 because my car was ugly. Karen, the HOA president, made the call. Same woman who once fined a neighbor for grass being too green. She expected me to pay up or tow it. Instead, I parked it right in front of the HOA office. By the time I was done, they'd wish they never messed with me. But let's start from the beginning. The morning started like any other. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, birds chirped, and the familiar sound of my coffee machine gurgling in the kitchen signaled another day in the neighborhood. I stretched, yawned, and grabbed my robe before heading outside to grab the newspaper from my driveway. And that's when I saw it. A bright orange violation notice slapped onto my windshield like a public execution order. I frowned, heart sinking as I peeled it off my 1996 Ford Taurus. A car that had seen better days, sure, but still ran just fine. The faded blue paint was chipped in places, and the back bumper had a dent from a minor fender bender, but it was far from the worst vehicle on the road. I unfolded the notice, my eyes scanning the bolded text. Vehicle violation. Does not meet community aesthetic standards. Immediate removal required. Fine. $250 per day. What the hell? I glanced around the street. Lined up along the pristine cul-de-sac were luxury cars in perfect condition. Sleek Teslas, glossy BMWs, and spotless Range Rovers, all reflecting the morning sun like trophies on display. HOA's ideal of a perfect neighborhood. And then there was my Taurus. Old? Yes. Functional? Also yes. Ugly? That was subjective. A sharp laugh snapped me out of my thoughts. Karen Whitmore. The queen of HOA tyranny stood on her meticulously groomed lawn, sipping from a monogrammed coffee mug as she watched me read the notice. Karen was a woman in her mid-50s, with artificially platinum blonde hair, deep tan, and an obsession with control. She wore her usual beige linen suit, looking like she was about to chair a corporate meeting instead of micromanaging her neighbors. She flashed me a fake smile over the rim of her cup. "Nothing personal, dear," she called, her voice syrupy sweet. "But we must maintain our property values." I clenched my jaw. Property values? My car isn't abandoned. It runs fine. She tilted her head like she was addressing a child. "I'm sure it does. But we have standards in this community, Carter. We can't have—" She waved vaguely at my car. "Eyesores ruining the aesthetic." I exhaled slowly, forcing myself not to lose my temper. Where in the bylaws does it say my car isn't allowed? Her smile didn't falter. "Oh, I'm sure you'll find that information in the documents we sent you when you moved in." Translation. It's a made-up rule, and she knows it. I turned my back on her, stepping inside. This wasn't over. I spent the rest of the day digging through every HOA document I had. And guess what? Nowhere, not in the community rules, not in the parking regulations, not in the vehicle registration policies, did it say anything about aesthetic violations regarding personal cars. They'd just made it up. By the time the sun set, I had called and emailed the HOA office 3 times. No response. I even drove to their building, only to be told by the board receptionist that I needed to submit my concerns in writing. Writing? They were fining me $250 a day, but I had to send them a formal request just to ask why? Oh, they wanted to play games? Fine. The next morning, I found another violation notice on my windshield. This time, the fine had increased to $500. I stormed over to Karen's house. She was in the middle of watering her gardenias, still dressed like she had a country club meeting in 10 minutes. I waved the notice at her. "You doubled the fine?" She sighed dramatically, setting down her watering can. "I warned you, Carter. The board agrees your vehicle is an issue." I crossed my arms. "I'd like to see a copy of that vote." She smirked. "Oh, we don't need a vote. HOA leadership has discretionary power." Translation? She decided this on her own. I clenched my fists, trying not to explode right there on her front lawn. "So what happens if I don't pay?" Her smile widened. "Then we'll have your car towed. At your expense, of course." My blood boiled. They were actually trying to rob me, fining me for a rule that didn't exist, threatening to steal my legally registered car, and calling it neighborhood standards. I wasn't just angry. I was ready for war. If they wanted to call my car an eyesore, I was going to make sure it was the biggest eyesore they had ever seen. That night I made a few modifications. Armed with a dozen cans of neon spray paint, I gave my 1996 Ford Taurus a new look, one they couldn't ignore. Bright fluorescent pink on the driver's side, acid green on the hood, a giant yellow smiley face painted across the trunk. And just for Karen, I added a huge sign across the back window. HOA's favorite ugly car. I stood back, admiring my work under the glow of the streetlights. Perfect. At 8 a.m. sharp, I rolled into the HOA parking lot. The HOA office was a small beige building, its glass doors reflecting the morning sun. The words Homeowners Association, Maple Ridge, were proudly displayed in silver lettering above the entrance. I pulled up right in front of the doors, parked at an angle, and made sure my new paint job was on full display for everyone walking in. I grabbed my folding chair, my morning coffee, and a newspaper, and settled in. Let's see how they liked staring at this eyesore all day. Karen arrives. It didn't take long. At 8:27 a.m., I heard heels clicking angrily against the pavement. Karen. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and she wore her usual beige linen suit, but her face was bright red with rage. She stormed up, clutching a clipboard in one hand and a Starbucks cup in the other. "What the hell is this?" she hissed through gritted teeth. I took a slow, satisfied sip of my coffee. My ugly car. Thought I'd share it with everyone. She gaped at the paint job, her hands trembling. "This is public property, you can't just—" I held up my keychain, jingling it. "Actually, this is a legal parking space, and I checked the bylaws. No rule against parking here." Her eye twitched. "This is harassment." I leaned back in my chair. "Is it? Because you fined me for this car just yesterday. Said it was an eyesore. I figured the HOA wouldn't mind looking at it up close." She made a strangled noise, whipped out her phone, and began furiously typing. I knew exactly who she was calling. By 9:15 a.m., 2 police officers pulled up in a black and white cruiser. Officer number 1 stepped out first. Mid-40s, black, broad shoulders, calm expression. His partner, officer number 2, was younger, white, with a sharp gaze. Karen practically sprinted to them, waving her arms. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. This man is harassing me and obstructing community business." Officer number 1 glanced at me, then at my perfectly legal parking spot. He adjusted his belt. "Sir, you own this vehicle?" I nodded, flipping open my registration papers. "Yes, sir. Registered, insured, legally parked." Officer number 2 looked at Karen. "What exactly is the issue?" She gestured wildly at my car. "Look at it. It's an abomination. He's violating HOA aesthetic policies." Officer number 1 raised an eyebrow. "Aesthetic policies? That's not a legal issue." Karen's face twisted. "But he's disrupting our operations." Officer number 2 crossed his arms. "Is he blocking an entrance?" "No, but—" "Is he trespassing?" "No, but—" "Did he threaten you?" She opened and closed her mouth, struggling for words. Officer number 1 sighed and turned to me. "You planning on staying here all day?" I grinned. Just long enough to make my point. Karen let out a furious shriek. "I want him fined, arrested, something." Officer number 2 shook his head. "No law is broken. If the HOA has an issue, they need to take it to civil court." I could have laughed. Karen was seething, her perfect hair slightly out of place. Unbelievable, she spat. I'll have your car towed, Carter. Just wait. I crossed my arms. Go ahead, but towing a legally parked car is vehicle theft. She froze. Officer number 1 gave her a look. He's right. I'd strongly advise against that. She stormed back into the HOA office, slamming the door behind her. Victory.